Heard it is.
So that means we need to turn them off when we're not speaking. But, yeah.
Okay.
With that,
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Combined Authority Board meeting of the 25th of August 2021. It's now 10 o'clock, so I would propose starting ideally on time. And just to say, it is a meeting that is being live streamed, so you could be on camera. I'd like to welcome members of the public and press to this meeting of the Combined Authority Board. Filming and photography are allowed at all of our public meetings, so do please feel free to film, take pictures or tweet during the meeting. I'd like to particularly thank Peterborough City Council for hosting on this occasion. Over the coming months, our hope is to hold board meetings around the county and once again bring the debate into the communities that we are representing. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will move to the muster point adjacent to the multi-storey car park. Before we begin, can I ask the board and everyone else present to turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate? Okay, thank you. So item 1.1 is announcements, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. And on this, as an announcement, I'm going to go a little bit off script and actually wanted to give a sort of personal overview before we go into the meeting. This morning, I had the opportunity to speak on Radio Cambridgeshire about my first 100 days as being a mayor. And it has been a genuine honour. And I wanted to say thank you to all the people who've supported me over that time. I've made some great friendships. I continue to work collaboratively with many people from across the region in very different organisations. But in truth, it's not what I've been thinking about over the last 100 days. It's what's happened in the last 20 years. Because actually we are approaching the anniversary of what we all saw, the horrific scenes of 9/11. And as we all know, the outcome of those terrorist atrocity was then the action that happened in Afghanistan. Back then, I was a young doctor working in Kingston, that was South London, and I was soon to find out that I would be a father, my firstborn. Now, we're 20 years down the line, and as I contemplate my oldest now leaving home, that's a whole generation has passed, I'm thinking of what's happened in the last 20 years to those families who've had children and what's happened in Afghanistan over that same time and what their personal circumstances are. It goes without saying that I've been touched by the images of desperation coming from Afghanistan. And whilst the Combined Authority has no authority over resettlement for Afghan refugees, I have been reassured by the many efforts being undertaken by the councils in this area to proactively support the call for resettlement. One, on the grounds of compassion, we support the call to government to be ambitious and generous in their targets for resettlement and echo the call for action, urgent action, to realise a target that provides certainty for what local authorities in the Combined Authority need to plan for. Secondly, and on the grounds of cooperation, the Combined Authority can create an infrastructure that supports our Afghan friends in terms of appropriate and necessary adult learning, skills and business support to engender an immediate and long-term successful resettlement into our region. I do know that our councils are doing everything possible to find ways to achieve resettlement in our community, and they are working with the Combined Authority officers to provide that support to enable refugees or people starting again to find the training, learning and opportunities so they can lead fulfilling, successful lives that benefits them, their families and all of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. In the meantime, I encourage all individuals to sign up to the community support via platforms like restuk.org. There is absolutely no luck or fortune in finding yourself to be a refugee. I can't even begin to imagine what these families are going through. But for those fleeing persecution in Afghanistan, I want any of those who arrive in this area of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to know that they will be met with the warmth of the Combined Authority and all the community around me. And there will be a welcome that involves the 3 C's: compassion, cooperation, and always a sense of community. I'm now going to move on to apologies for absence. Would the Democratic Service Officer let us know of any apologies?
Thank you, Mayor. There are apologies from Councillor Ryan Fuller, who is substituted by Councillor John Nish, Councillor Herbert, who is substituted by Councillor Martin Smart, Austin Adams, who is substituted by Professor Andy Neely, and from Councillor Edna Murphy.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in any items being considered today? Declarations of interest can also be made at any point during the meeting. I will therefore move on to item 1.2, which is the meetings of the meeting on the 28th of July and its action log. We are being asked to approve the minutes as an accurate record. If any member wishes to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can you indicate that now? Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. Just one little typo at the bottom towards the bottom of page 18. It talks about active travel funding had been very poor and that East Cambridgeshire had not benefited at all due to the parameters around that funding, not finding.
All right, yes, I can see it. I can see it around that fund. Okay, Vishenda. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I see no objections, so we will. Sorry, I'm going to take a vote. Is that okay on the minutes?
Unless we general consensus and take it unanimously.
Okay, no objection, so we'll take that as unanimously that they have been accepted. And are there any questions on the action log? Nope. Okay, we'll move on then. So item 1.3 is petitions, but as we have received no petitions this time, we will move straight on to item 1.4, one I'm looking forward to, the public questions. We have received 3 public questions this month. Copies have been published on the Combined Authority website and circulated electronically to all members of the board. We will take the questions in the order in which they were received. The first question is from Rod Hart on behalf of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Climate Action Coalition. Unfortunately, Mr. Hart is unable to attend the meeting today, so he will be sent a written response to his question, and this will be published on the website. However, the second question is comes from Dorothy Ball. And Dorothy is here. So Dorothy, would you like to come forward to the table? You have up to 2 minutes to ask your question. If you are still speaking after 1.5 minutes, the Democratic Service Officer will raise her hand to let you know, and so that you can draw your remarks to a close.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all today. I'll just give you a little bit about my background so you can see where I'm coming from. I've got a PhD in civil engineering, and after studying physics and several years in the water industry, I became a science and maths teacher, but I've now retired from that and escaped. I also chair a foundation of which has a considerable amount of money which we give towards environmental projects to reduce the effects of climate change, and that keeps me in touch with what's going on nationally in terms of projects and where we need to have action happening. I'm also involved in many local environmental organisations, most recently the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Climate Action Coalition, which Rod was also involved in. And importantly, just recently I've become a grandmother, so I really care about what happens in the future. I just want to explain why I put in my question about the A47. We have an urgent need to reduce emissions. That's widely accepted. Peterborough has declared a climate emergency, aiming to become carbon neutral in just 9 years' time, when we've had a recent reminder from the IPCC report. There are huge costs in making this happen. So we have to use the resources we have for essential things that need to happen. We can't afford to use them on things that are not of vital importance. There has been a change in transport habits post-pandemic. More people are working at home. And research says that when you upgrade roads, it always increases traffic. So my question is the really expensive dualling of the A47 still a priority? Is it a priority to do the same to the A10? I'm a cyclist in Peterborough and was hugely disappointed that we lost our last pop-up cycle lane, which I used to use 3 to 4 times a week, and it transformed my cycling journey. If we didn't spend so much money on doing these roads, we would have money available to do something about cycling infrastructure. And that would have 3 additional benefits. There'd be increased exercise levels, which would have improved health outcomes. There would be reduced car use and congestion, and there'd be reduced air pollution. My son and granddaughter live in Stockholm, where cycle lanes are everywhere, where cyclists and pedestrians have priorities at junctions.
Dorothy, you've had your 2 minutes.
And I've had my minutes. So,
2 minutes.
can I just finally say
If
that
you
I have
could.
therefore 3 things I want. Will you, if you really care about active travel and reducing car use and about reducing emissions, act proposals for wholesale dualling of the A47 and the A10 and put much of that money into permanent and effective green active travel infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. I will focus on the question as it was presented to us before the meeting, but I appreciate the other additional information you provided around that, and at the same time point out I am a keen cyclist myself. The A47 is of strategic importance to the regional and national economy. Enhancing the route to improve connectivity will stimulate growth, employment, education, housing and the agri-tech economy in the north of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, contributing to, importantly, levelling up the region. Improving the A47 will also complement other transport and infrastructure priorities such as Wisbech Rail and increase the potential for a future development of a garden town at Wisbech. We are collaboratively working with Highways England and who are currently reviewing existing evidence, including the work delivered by the Combined Authority. Highways England are assessing the current and future conditions of the A47, as well as reviewing and identifying options for the A47 between Peterborough and Wisbech. This will include, as you requested, assessing options for their climate and environmental impact, which is a very important thing to me as well, and any forecast changes in travel behaviour post-COVID. If options are progressed further, mitigation measures will be considered and implemented as far as possible. The outcome of Highways England is expected to complete at the end of October 2021. Do you have a supplementary question?
I would just say, given that we are in a climate emergency, we have to reassess our priorities, because if we don't deal with the emissions that we have, the costs of everything and actually surviving in a civilised way that we currently have will be astronomical. Thank you. Not really a question.
I will come back on that, Mrs. Ball. Hopefully you will be already aware that there has been a sea change in the approach from the Combined Authority in adopting the independent review of Baroness Brown in terms of how we will be approaching the climate emergency. I am a mayor that is committed to dealing with the problems of the climate emergency and working with all constituent members of the board to improve things. Thank you. The final question comes from Anthony Carpin, who is also a local resident. Mr. Carpin is also unable to attend the meeting today, so he will also receive a written response to his question, and this will be published on the Combined Authority website. Thank you again to Mrs. Dorothy Ball for coming along to the meeting today. Sorry, Martin.
Middle one. Oh, I got it, yep. Sorry to interrupt you, Mayor.
No, sorry.
I just heard you there. You said it was going to be published on the website, the answers, but obviously not everyone can make it for various reasons to do with COVID and other things. But it's just a bit of a shame we can't have the answers in public now, recorded and available, because, you know, getting on the website might not be the thing that everybody can do, you know, just a thought. Normally in City Council in Cambridge, we'd have the answers given sort of there and then, really, not later in a written form. But just a thought.
I'll take it on board. For today, the format, as already described, will proceed, but I'll take that as feedback and something to consider for the future. Sorry, can I just ask the legal...
Sorry, just to assist. Yeah, the reason that we stuck to that was that it's set out in the Constitution, but as members are aware, we're looking at various things around the Constitution. It may be something that's picked up. Actually, there's a readout of questions that can be something that's developed.
Thank you. That's helpful with the clarification. Thank you again to Dorothy Ball for coming along to the meeting today, and also to Mr. Hart and Mr. Carpen for their questions. I really do appreciate the fact that local groups and residents are taking an interest in the work of the Combined Authority and taking the time for those organisations and individuals to engage directly with myself, the board and other committees, and giving us the opportunity to hear your thoughts firsthand. We also have several questions from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we'll take these under agenda item 2.4, IMET Opportunity and Combined Authority Needs. I'll now move on to item 1.5, the Forward Plan. The Forward Plan is published online and is updated regularly. Following a request last month, the version included in the board meeting papers now shows the changes that have been made to the plan since it was last published. They're in red. There is one change to note from the published plan. The annual report and business plan 6-month refresh will be brought to the board's September meeting. Are there any executive committee decisions which members would want to be reserved to the board, or any other questions on the forward plan? Councillor Bailey.
Just a small point. I've just been looking at some of the timings on the forward plan. It does seem there's quite a delay sometimes between when things go through committee and then I'll put on Combined Authority board agendas. So I just wonder if that's worth having a look at a bit more closely.
Is there any specific ones that you, and I can ask them maybe...
Item 35, which is Cambridge South Station, for example.
Okay.
I've noticed it in the past as well. It's just a small comment.
Okay. We'll look at that to see if that can be brought forward. Well, apart from that comment, I propose that we approve the forward plan, which was included with the papers published on the 17th of August. I'm proposing it. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Lucy. I'll take Lucy. Councillor Singer. Thank you. So those in favour, please raise your hands. And there's no one against, and so that looks unanimous. Okay, so let's move on to item 2.1, the Wisbech Access Strategy. Sorry. And this is decisions that come directly to the Combined Authority Board, I say the Wisbech Access Strategy. This was discussed at the last meeting when the Board decided to support, in principle, the use of 1.88 million of existing budget to complete design work and land acquisitions for the 3 remaining schemes within the Wisbech Access Strategy project, subject to the business case being received by the Board. This key decision was added to the forward plan and published on the 5th of August 2021 under general exception arrangements. This report will be introduced by Anna Graham, the Transport Programme Manager. Thank you, Anna.
Obviously need a firmer push. The purpose of this paper is to seek approval for the drawdown of 1.88 million, subject to approval funding from the medium term. Yeah, here we go. I'll start again. So the purpose of this paper is to seek approval for the drawdown of £1.88 million subject to approval funding from the medium-term financial plan for the Wisbech Access Strategy project to fund the purchasing of land, completion of detailed design and the full business case. In June of this year, Cambridgeshire County Council reported to the Wisbech Access Strategy Project Board on the outcome of their review of the project, following a number of risks emerging. The review had shown progress with mitigating the key project risks. However, it identified that to deliver all 3 projects, the total forecast project outturn cost would be in the region of £19.5 million, far exceeding the available budget. Cambridgeshire County Council considered the available options for progressing the project, assessing each option on deliverability, price and value for money. Cambridgeshire County Council recommended that the project should complete the purchase of the required land, finish the detailed design and undertake a procurement exercise to ascertain new construction estimates. By progressing to the end of detailed design and completing purchasing of the land, the project would mitigate the potential for abortive costs of spend already incurred on land negotiations and design. It would also enable the project to become a pipeline project should funding become available in the future. At its meeting of the 19th of July 2021, the Business Board considered the Wisbech Access Strategy change control, rejecting it as the project would no longer meet the Local Growth Fund criteria. This was later discussed in the July Combined Authority Board meeting. It was recognised at the July Authority Board meeting that there was merit to having a pipeline project, but noting that undertaking a procurement exercise without a funding strategy would not be appropriate at this time. It was agreed that the Wisbech Access Strategy project would seek approval to draw down the 1.88 million required. A technical note has been produced by Cambridgeshire County Council and is included in Appendix 1. It shows that all combinations of options were considered before recommending the completion of detailed design and purchasing of the land, and provides benefit-cost ratios for each of those options as a guide. The technical note describes the strategic case for the 3 remaining projects that, if built, would support the Fendon local plan. It also suggests that the BCR is in a region of 1.9, which will be further refined and developed in the full business case. Commend this report to the board.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'm very grateful to members of the board for the support that was given at last month's meeting that this matter be brought back and be considered today. And I reiterate the points that I made last month, that the work which is being done here or being prepared for here is absolutely vital for the town which is highest, I'm sorry to say, on the index of multiple deprivation in the entire county of Cambridgeshire, in fact in the entire combined authority area, for that town to be able to grow and to prosper, it is absolutely essential that there is infrastructure in place to be able to support that growth, both in terms of housing and in terms of commerce and industry. So this particular set of schemes is absolutely vital, and I very much welcome the proposal to bring this to the stage where it will be available as a pipeline scheme when funding becomes available. I will, Mayor, if you permit me, say something about this in the next agenda item as well, but to assuage Councillor Fitzgerald's concerns on that, I'm not going to be opposing the next agenda item, but I'd like just to add something supplementary to the next agenda item for consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm supportive of this. The one question I had was about the governance of the project going forward and lessons learned from it to date, because it's been a project that's had, it's gone through different phases, let's say, and I'm just conscious that in the business case there wasn't much discussion about how it will be governed and managed going forward. It'd be good just to be reassured on that.
Yes, thank you, and Mr. Neely. I think that I have a conversation with the Chief Executive of the County Council and also the Chief Executive of the GCP this afternoon. So I will be raising this at that meeting with them to assure this board that there are sufficient governance processes in place and that we are, as you said, taking the lessons learned from the history of this matter to ensure that we don't encounter such problems in the future. Thank you.
I fully understand the importance of this and the problems that it needs to address, but there seems to be considerable uncertainty over future funding. I just wonder, what sort of have we dealt with all the issues that have led to the delays? Have they all been addressed? And what sort of assurance do we have that there will be further funding coming forward for the sort of final delivery of the whole scheme?
Yeah. So regarding the risks, regarding to the risks, they are being addressed. So one of the key risks is the land acquisition. So by continuing with that and seeing that to the end, that will enable the project to be picked up and move forward when funding becomes available. The other side of it was utility companies as well, working with them about designing out diversions. Again, that's work that we can continue to do as part of the detailed design and the completion of that detailed design.
So we're talking about when funding becomes available, not if funding becomes available. I mean, that's the critical point.
That is correct. Councillor Bailey?
Well, just to add, I mean, this had a good airing at the last board meeting. I think we were all hugely in support of it. It's obviously a matter of regret that we're in this position. I think the business board took a principled decision because, you know, getting the project to this stage wasn't going to meet the outcomes of, you know, the finances that the business board have for the purposes for which they have to spend it. So, you know, I absolutely support the decision that the business board took. But we do have to find a way to move this very important project for the Wisbech area forward, so I totally support it. It just is shocking, really, though, we're facing double the costs of what they were proposed to be at the outset, and the proposals that went to the business board. You know, clearly it's an enormous change. We're not talking 10%, and obviously as time goes by, the costs will be increasing again further. So I think it's a real difficult situation that we're in, but we have to support Wisbech to get out of this, and I think it's absolutely critical that we don't lose the money that's already been spent by, you know, aborting at the point where we haven't done the land acquisition. So I totally support moving this forward and support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I can't see anybody else indicating a need or what desire to speak, so I'm wanting to move the recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowden. So, to be approved, the recommendation A requires a vote in favour at least 2/3 of all members or their substitute members appointed by the constituent councils, to include the members appointed by Cambridgeshire County Council or Peterborough City Council or their substitute members. A reminder for those watching the meeting that co-opted members do not have voting rights on any board decisions. The monitoring officer will confirm the outcome of the vote. So votes in favour of accepting this recommendation, please raise your hands. Unanimous? So that is unanimous. So we'll move on and say that's been passed. That's okay with you? Passed, thank you. We'll move swiftly on then to item 2.2. Item 2.2 is Peterborough Station Quarter. This report will be introduced by Mehmet Ahmet, our Transport Manager. Mehmet.
Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you. Morning, members. Thank you for listening to me today. We have two recommendations in front of you. Recommendation A is recommending to the CPCA Board a drawdown of £350,000 from the Transport Response Fund for the development of a strategic outline business case, and B is to note the programme to progress the actual development of the strategic outline business case. So Peterborough City Council, Network Rail and LNER are seeking funding from the Combined Authority to prepare a strategic outline business case to support investment proposals for Peterborough City Station. Peterborough Rail Station is an important rail interchange on the London to Edinburgh East Coast Main Line, with an annual throughput of 5 million passengers, including 960,000 passengers who make their interchange for connecting to other destinations. This is only expected to grow, making it a gateway to the wider area and the wider region. Some feasibility work has already been completed, very much conceptual at this stage, but it puts a very positive case forward for activities to continue in terms of developing the business case. That report concluded that the next steps would be to commission a more detailed work around design and developing the business case, so there was more firmed up costings and the benefits could be more understood. The business case will build on this feasibility work to showcase how comprehensive the redevelopment of this nature would be to transform the city, but also as a gateway to the wider region and beyond. The opportunities in the paper, as it stands and was picked up from the conceptual work, was creation of a new gateway station, enhancing the station access, improving connectivity to the station, and I guess I can only reiterate that this is probably only some of the main points, and I think the strategic outline business case will look to build upon this. So the programme for developing a strategic outline business case will commence immediately, with the work to be completed by the end of the year, early January. This is a targeted piece of work and is aligned to the swift, pragmatic and efficient enhancement delivery, i.e. speeds in short, that Network Rail perform against. Therefore, it is recommended to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of £350,000 from the Transport Response Fund to enable this work to be completed. Thank you, members and the Mayor.
Very well presented. Over to debate for members of the Combined Authority. Anybody want to come in? Oh, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. So there's 4 reasons that I can't support this. Firstly, it's a project that, as has been the case persistently over the last 4 years, has just popped up. It's not part of our long-term strategic plan. It isn't checked against our priorities. And our new priorities, as you've made perfectly clear, Mayor, over the last couple of months, are environment and health and well-being. So, we've got to, as an organisation, stop acting in this way. We've got to properly plan our work programme and stop having stuff just popping up out of nowhere, which doesn't reference anything else we're doing. Secondly, we're still in the throes of the pandemic and we have no idea where it's going to go. So I've been to London 3 times in the past 3 weeks. I've travelled on half-empty trains and I've parked my electric car in half-empty car parks, and I'm not seeing any sense at the moment of the sort of return to work the sort of levels that we had prior to the pandemic. So the truth is, we just don't know at the moment what people's plans are going to be for work post-pandemic, or what their plans are going to be for transport to work. So I'm afraid to say that, this is all the ridership is expected to grow. We don't know that the ridership is expected to grow because we have no idea about what work practices are going to be. Now, thirdly, I gather from the papers that the station here has seen investment in the last 10 years. Well, actually, many other stations in our area have seen nothing for decades. So why Peterborough? I mean, I appreciate that it's a gateway station, it is important, but there are other stations which could have investment and, which actually would probably deliver far more benefits than in Peterborough at the moment. And then most importantly, this absolutely conflicts with the 2 overall priorities of environment and health and well-being. And quite honestly, if we are accepting the recommendations of the Climate Commission, we should not be investing, as we've already heard from Dr. Ball, in roads, and we absolutely shouldn't be investing in massive, great multi-storey car parks, which only serve to encourage and increase car use. So, if we mean what we say about our commitment to zero carbon, and I'm surprised at Peterborough being highly ambitious about their intentions of moving to become zero carbon here, and yet they're building massive great car parks. I've just parked this morning in the car park here. I mean, if I'm parking in Cambridge, you have to go right up to the roof in order to find a parking place, or did prior to COVID. That's all changed. But there was an empty multi-storey car park for me to park in this morning. This is yesterday's solutions. It will not address tomorrow's problems. So I'm afraid this is completely unacceptable in my book, and I really hope, Mayor and colleagues, that investment in car parking is seen to be unacceptable in yours as well. You know, if this project is about regeneration, then regeneration post-COVID should be zero carbon regeneration. This should be a green recovery, and this is not contributing to any sort of green recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's a very powerful statement. I guess I've got one question, and just if you don't mind me asking you about, would it be better if car parks had more access to electrical charging points, if all the car parks had electrical charging points?
So I think one of the things I'm hoping to talk to this board about in the future is about establishing an electric vehicle charging strategy for the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. You know, surely, you know, Peterborough is a city which has tremendous bus services, has huge potential for really good, high-quality cycling as well. You know, surely, if you're going to build something associated with a car park, it should be a centre that encourages people to travel on electric buses to get there, to cycle their bikes, to secure their expensive electric bikes there. You know, this has to all be predicated on sustainable modes of transport, not on cars. And, you know, even electric cars still contribute to congestion and they still have a carbon cost to them. So, you know, let's invest our money in stuff that's really innovative and lead the way and do something that's radically different.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask a few questions once this main debate is finished, if you don't mind. But I'd like to respond, first of all, to the comments which have just been made by Councillor Smith. And I'd like to bring us back to the real world, if at all possible. The fact is that Peterborough City is the largest city that we have in the combined authority area by quite a distance. And it serves a very large hinterland as well, with a great population. But unlike the comments made by Councillor Smith, I have to say that the bus service in Peterborough and the surrounding areas is not that good. For example, for Whittlesea, a town of 13,000 population, which is merely 6 miles away from Peterborough Station, the last bus that we have coming out of Peterborough is just after 6 o'clock. And it's absolutely hopeless for anyone using Peterborough Station to travel any great distance, including to London, for work. I have a number of individuals within my own area, my own ward, who have expressed great interest in actually using Peterborough Station and using public transport, and they would if it were available, but it's not. And for many people, public transport is not going to be a solution in its current form for a long period of time in terms of their need to be able to get from where they live to where they need to get to. So we have to recognise the fact that Peterborough Station is a major gateway for a significant area, both within and without the combined authority area. And I have issues with this in that I'd like the LUF funding bid to be on another bid. But taking that to one side, I see the value of this, and therefore I see the value of putting in the £350,000 towards building up this, if only it might end up being a pipeline project. It might be. We don't know what the result of this is going to be in terms of the work which is going to be done. But I see the value of it, and I see the value of Peterborough as a major centre which people do need to get to. And I think that the anti-car rhetoric is going too far, to be quite honest, in that it's failing to reflect the reality of people's lives, and the reality of people's lives that there is going to be for some considerable time to come. Now, as members will be aware, or some members will be aware who have been on the combined authority slightly longer than others, I am not a person who is wedded to the idea that we are going to have private cars as the main means of transport forever. Very far from it. But we are some considerable distance away from a realistic alternative for an enormous number of individuals, an enormous number of people, particularly in the more rural areas of our combined authority area. So I very much welcome the proposal which is in front of us here. I think it's appropriate for us to go forward with this. I will argue about the choice which is finally made about which transport bid we should put in for LUF 2, for the second round of the transport LUF, and it's quite appropriate for me to do so. But I also see that this is a quite appropriate and a very worthwhile project, and certainly worth putting this money in to bring it forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Councillor Nsinga.
Thank you. I think there have been some important points made by Councillor Smith, and I think that we are at the very beginning of. This is the starting of a potentially very large project. I think it's important to take those points. I'm not going to oppose this. I think that the case that's been made by Peterborough for investment in the station and the need. One of the things that is very important is that we do need to be encouraging more people to use public transport, and rail is one of those important public transport uses. We clearly need to improve the bus services, not just in Peterborough and Whittlesea, but across the whole of the Combined Authority area. I think it would be of value to hear from Wayne about whether or not it would be possible for this project as it moves forward to be less car dependent than the current proposals look like, or to certainly have some future proofing put into these proposals. And I think that as they move forward, we do need to be bearing in mind that however much we may want everybody to move towards electric cars, cars themselves are not the future of transport and should not be. We've been hearing about the importance of cycling. Cycling is not only much better environmentally and much better in terms of pollution in a city centre like Peterborough, but also much better for everybody's health, which is an important factor for the mayor's, kind of close to the mayor's own heart. So I think as I do think that this project should be taken forward. I think that reinvestment in the station in Peterborough is an important thing for the Combined Authority to be looking at. Whether we will be able to take it as far forward as whether it gets to the Luff bid, whether it wins the Luff bid, I don't know, but it's certainly worth looking at. But certainly thinking about this project in terms of the future of transport, not just about building car parks, is an important point to have been made, and I hope something that can be taken forward as the project is taken forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey and maybe Councillor Fitzgerald, you invited, so maybe Councillor Bailey first.
Thank you. I think members of the public might be confused into thinking this is just about building car parks. It's absolutely not. The other, no, that's an incidental element to release land for development, and the project is clearly laid out at 2.5. Part of it is about improved, safer and more direct walking and cycling connections to the city centre, upgraded and extended platform canopies, new West Station entrance, easing passenger flows at peak commuting times. It's about improvements to the station and encouraging people to use rail travel for journeys. That's absolutely, it's about making it more attractive and bringing it up to date, fit for the 21st century, and getting people to use it. I do just want to touch base with Councillor Smith on something she said about the Combined Authority's two major priorities being the environment and health and well-being. I don't believe as a board we have agreed that they are our two main priorities. We've been going through a reprioritisation process with all our individual projects. We have absolutely all agreed and supported that these are overarching themes that run through everything that we do and need to be carefully considered every single time we do something. But if you look at most of the projects on the list, and I suspect our resident who came here to talk to us today may well have done that and been very concerned about many of the projects on our list, because they are about development and growth and building and using concrete. And those things none of those things are environmentally friendly. So it's about taking a balanced approach and making sure we do everything that we can to mitigate the projects that we're doing, and that the projects are to improve the situation, not make it worse. But we can't sit and have a conversation about every single project and say, well, we can't do that because of the environment, we can't do that because of health and well-being. That's just, it's just not going to work. We have to remember that we exist as a combined authority for one reason and one reason only. It's to double GVA and provide increased revenues to HM Treasury. That's why we exist. It's why we have a devolution deal. And if we lose sight of that, we probably won't exist for very long. So I do support this project. And for me, it's about making the station more accessible, more usable, more user-friendly, more attractive, and encouraging people to use rail travel. So I absolutely support it. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Niche. I know. Professor.
Thank you. So actually, Councillor Bailey covered a number of the points I was going to make. I mean, I too would support this, and I don't think it's just about building car parks. I think the points that Councillor Smith made are really important, and there's an opportunity here to absolutely think about how to redevelop the station quarter in a way which is more sustainable, which encourages people to walk and cycle, etc. So we shouldn't get too focused on the car parking provision, but I understand the reason for building multi-storey car park to clear space so then you can make it a more attractive environment. I came here on the train this morning and had a lovely walk across here. The most disappointing bit of the walk was the arrival at the station, I would say, and so I would support this.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't prolong it for too long because actually, first of all, I thought I was on the wrong page because we were talking about stuff and I'm thinking it wasn't all about that. It was about actually looking at the wider aspects of what we're going to do with that particular area. And yes, I am supportive of it because actually it is looking at that wider aspect of all sorts of uses. And I think the point to get across is that it will be looking at, you know, other forms of transport and that connectivity of ensuring that that can be utilised in that location, which is in need of a lot of review. It's not particularly the best of gateway entries, and I think it will vastly support it. You know, until such times as we can teleport each other around, which will probably use an awful lot of energy, we still will have to use different modes of transport. Some of those will be personal ones and powered by, hopefully, better environmentally friendly things in the future. But we might still have to put those certain vehicles somewhere if a car park comes to fruition as well. So I do support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Niche. I think most people, but I'm pretty sure that representative for Peterborough City Council might want to say a few things.
I do. I'll try not to go on for too long. But Bridget, I hope I can change your mind with what I'm about to say, because I think you've made some assumptions that are coming from a completely wrong place. All the things that you talked about matter as much to me and the people of Peterborough also, and you are making assumptions about the type of development and what it might include and what it might not. So let's just firstly say, if you were listening to me on the radio this morning, everything's on the table, but we want an iconic piece that showcases the gateway to the city, the fens and everywhere else, that is both green and sustainable. So that is at the forefront of what we're talking about. And one of our questioners earlier talked about cycling very passionately. So, you know, people who've talked to me directly will know that that's a priority. But at the moment, the way that the station is structured and the road network does not make that work very well. So we will design and build into any scheme, particularly from the western side of the approach, new options for cycling that will include dedicated cycle lanes and a way into the city that keeps motorists and cyclists separate. And, you know, when we talk about car parks, as Dr. Neely says, this is about reprovisioning space to enhance and make available space by decking or multi-stories. But the fact is that area is ripe for redevelopment. So please believe me, it's not, you know, the car is not going away though. The car is not going away. We can't ignore the fact that the car will be here to stay for considerable time. Let's hope they all go electric and we put in that infrastructure as well and we get rid of diesel and petrol engines. But also we need to future-proof it for all the transport options and make it accessible and sustainable, as I said. So when you talk about, you know, driving into car parks that are empty, well, at the moment, all our staff aren't here. Because our public health advice at the moment, it says, no, stay at home if you can, but things will get back to normal. We all have to go on and live our lives. There'll still be 5 million people coming through that station, and it's expected to grow. Because if you're also saying that doesn't grow, what happens to our housing growth numbers and our population figures that are set to increase? Do we say, oh no, stop having children, we haven't got anywhere to put you? That's not going to happen. So things will carry on. Life will go on post-pandemic. Just a word about LUF funding to assure my colleague here. I'm not relying on LUF funding. It's great if LUF funding comes up, but this is a project that goes beyond LUF funding. This might be other funding that the combined authority or we directly as an authority bid into MHCLG for, or indeed it could come from the private sector. There's a £600 million investment plan for Peterborough in terms of the private sector. Now, why shouldn't some of that come from there? So this is not all about LUF funding, and I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket because it's a competitive process and those bids will come forward and win on merit. If Peterborough wins that bid, great. If not, so be it. it's still a project that should go forward for all the reasons that have been outlined today. So this is a £50 million investment that we could go up to in Peterborough. It's ambitious, but I've made no secret that, you know, Peterborough is an ambitious place, and I want to see that carry on through, and I will be doing all I can to make that happen. It's an important rail interchange on the East Coast main line here, and other stations, including Darlington and York, have already received government investment, so why should we not do the same? So, Councillor Smith, I would urge you to change your mind and take my word that the things that you're concerned about, we're concerned about. As for when things come on the agenda, you know, look, this has been around for us. This, to you, it might have just popped up, but it's not just popped up. Mehmet will inform you that this has been hanging around for quite some time, and I've had to push, now that I'm on the Combined Authority, to get it here today, because we are under pressure from Network Rail. That's the reason for the haste, because they want to see action, and we shouldn't just through protocol, you know, we can all agree we're sensible people. It's either a good idea or a bad idea, and I think everybody's saying it's a good idea, so I hope you'll take some comfort in my commitment to those green environmental items that you're concerned about, that we all should be concerned about. But overall, I have to say to you, we have to strike a balance here, because we can't be one thing or another. It's about balancing everything in the round about what's good for the city, and I believe this is an important scheme for the city, and we should unanimously support it, as you would expect me to do if you brought something sensible to the board, and I'm saying this is sensible. I would expect that you would expect me to support it if it was the right thing to do. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Smart just wants to come in there. I know.
Getting at the end there, yeah. So just briefly, Mayor, I think it's important that leaders like Councillor Smith say things like what she just said. I mean, in 2014, when I was first a councillor, I said that Cambridge should get rid of all its car parks and just put like car parking on the edge. Of course, that's a problem because we make income from car parking, which would be a problem. But it's important to say these things and to have plans to try to move forward in that way. So I support Councillor Smith in what she said, although on the other hand, Councillor Bowden said about, you know, deprivation in Wisbech, which he said was the worst in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which might well be the case, I'm not sure. But there are areas of deprivation all over the area, including in Cambridge, but also in Peterborough. And access to Peterborough is important for Peterborough to, you know, address those problems. So it's a tricky one, I think. But I note that B is for noting, and it's A that we're voting on today. And so we'll go from there, I suppose. But that's just what I wanted to add, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor. Councillor Smith, you've indicated you want to speak again. It is a debate. I guess I would ask the question, has Councillor Fitzgerald changed your mind?
So it has been a really good debate, and I have really appreciated what I've heard. I'm not going to change my mind on this occasion, because I hope that my challenge will make us do better in future. And we've got to make it clearer to ourselves and to the public about how important addressing climate change is to us. We can't just assume that people know that we really care about this stuff. We're going to have to start shouting about it. So if I could just briefly address a few points. I think we as a board need a conversation very soon about what we are here for. And I don't believe that we are here just to double GVA. I think we're here to make life better for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And that isn't just financial. That's about their air quality, their life experience, their access to health, their access to training. It's about every minute of every day. And so that is our responsibility. If we narrow it down just to doubling GVA, you know, God help us, quite honestly. So, you know, just assuming that things are going to return to normal, I'm afraid, is not. You know, what is it? We know there's going to be a new normal. It's not going to be like the old normal. It's quite obvious. And, you know, we're going to have to put a lot of thought and quite a lot of research with partners and with government as well into getting a sense of what the new normal is going to be, so we can start planning for this new normal, because it's absolutely not going to be the old normal. And calling for balance, you know, the climate change is at the tipping point. So balance doesn't cut the mustard anymore, because we are tipping over into the point of no return for our climate. You know, we've been talking about tipping point for a long time. Dr. Ball's the expert. You know, I suspect we've passed the tipping point now, actually. So we are now clawing our way back to salvage what we can from this terrible mess. So, you know, we have to do more in our papers and in our planning to show people that we really are ambitious and we really want to make a difference. And I do appeal again for us to start thinking differently about things and to, you know, I know that MHCLG see potential in us to be an exemplar combined authority for an urban rural area with quite a small population, to do things differently and do them really well. And I think, you know, we have to do everything we can to prove that we can be the exemplar. And hanging it on the environment is actually going to deliver the quickest results there. So not this time, but we'll see next time.
Thank you, Mayor. I did ask if I could at the end just ask a question. One thing which may be of interest and of help to members of the board is that I've spent some days in London as well. And what is happening in London is quite interesting and surprising. And as with many things, of course, once you hear about it, it makes sense, but people didn't ever predict this. And certainly on the suburban rail routes within London, Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays is again standing room only for people going into and going out of the centre of London, at both the City and the West End during rush hour. Mondays and Fridays, and I've been there, I was there both last Monday and the last Friday, Mondays and Fridays it's almost like a ghost town. Yes, things are changing, but they are changing in a certain direction. How far that will go, who will know? It will not go back to the way it used to be, that's for sure. But one of the things which has been noted is a significant number of individuals have been moving out of London, a greater number than we've seen before, and coming to places like Cambridgeshire, and for that matter Lincolnshire, because they now no longer need 5 days a week to go into the City and back, or into the West End and back. And so we're getting people coming into our areas who are commuting, but only on a part-time basis, down to London. And it makes the rail link all the more important. So I would not want to write off the rail link to London as being something which is not going to be utilised by anyone. I can promise you it will be and will continue to be for a very long time to come. And given how environmentally friendly it is, we should be encouraging that as much as possible. I had a question that I would like answering, if I may, Mayor, and that is, we are talking about the possibility of a round 2 bid for the Transport Luff bidding process. Do we know, is there likely to be a round 3 or not?
I'm going to hand that one to Mehmet. Is level 3 an option?
There's no indication yet. There isn't. They talk about other rounds. Obviously, they've mentioned round 2, but that's what they've mentioned so far. So, obviously, we'll keep tabs on, you know, and have conversations with government in terms of what other funding potentials there are. Yeah.
The reason I asked that question, Mayor, was that it seemed to me that the amount of money which has been earmarked, as far as I can tell, for the transport side of Luff, doesn't equal the amounts coming through on round 1 and round 2. And that's why I was wondering whether a round 3 is likely to be on the cards, or have I just got my arithmetic wrong? And if there is a round 3, or maybe even on round 2, depending upon what happens over the course of the next few months, then, Mayor, I would like us to continue to consider the possibility of a Fenland transport bid, to go into for the one successful bid that we're allowed to have, which could accommodate both the Wisbech access study that we've already talked about, the March area transport strategy, and the Wisbech railway station work, which I know you're now aware of. And so there is an alternative which could be put forward for us, either for round 2 or potentially for round 3 if this does not go forward for round 2 or is not successful in round 2. And I just thought I'd hang my hat on this at the moment as being an appropriate place to do so. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Bowden, I would expect nothing less, but I'm all for equality. Does everybody else want to put a bid in now or something, or make a comment for South Cams, County Council, East? No, the floor is everywhere. If you're going to do it, everybody else has a chance.
It seems everybody has double dibs today.
Although I will say, as Councillor Bailey, we are, as a board, meant to be working out our priorities, and we're meant to be doing this together. So I have allowed you to speak. Everybody else has a choice, but I refer you back to Councillor Bailey's thing. We're working on a group of priorities.
I'm sorry, Councillor Smith, I've not managed to convince you. But again, if your reason for not supporting it is based on an assumption that it's not an environmentally friendly scheme or sustainable, then that's the wrong reason not to support it, because I thought I'd given you assurances. Because bear in mind, we are the city that has, you know, this ambitious zero net carbon target of just 9 years, I'm reminded earlier. So, you know, we are doing all we can, and trust me, you know, through our planning process and development process, all these things are embedded at the outset in principle of these schemes. So to assume this scheme wouldn't be is completely the wrong thing to do. So, you know, because what I'm hearing, you can't support it because it's not environmentally friendly or it's not this or not the other. That's just an assumption that is completely wrong. So I'm hopeful that most will support the scheme, and the way it's funded, again, just to reiterate, that will come out in the wash, whether it's LUF or whether it's anything else. I'm fairly relaxed about it because I can see the benefits in the scheme to the city, to the wider area, and as I said on the radio, why wouldn't you want to come to Peterborough and do this? I'm enthusiastic about it to the point where I was gushing this morning because I think that it's such a good thing to do. And we're an ambitious city and we want to grow sustainably, in a green, clean and environmentally friendly way, and that's, while I'm leader, that's going to be how we're trying to do business with everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't waste any more time.
No, Councillor Fitzgerald, much appreciated. Obviously some people have now spoken twice, and I think we're probably beginning to hear the same things. Oh, it's okay, you can gush away. I just would add my acknowledgements to the debate. I'm grateful for the input that everybody has offered. It reassures me that after 100 days, people are talking about the environment as a priority within one of many priorities within the combined authorities plans. Also, the idea of public health and improvement in, well-being. And I think the idea that making life better is something that we should be discussing. I acknowledge what Councillor Bailey says in terms of the devolution deal. There is an expectation over 25 years that GVA has to be doubled, but life's more than just about money sometimes, and we need to think about that, and we need to do that together as a board. So I'm actually now keen to move to the recommendation from the chair, and I'm looking for a seconder. Oh, no surprises there. So thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. So to be approved, the recommendation A requires a vote in favour by at least 2/3 of all members appointed by the constituent councils, to include the members appointed by Cambridgeshire County Council or Peterborough City Council or their substitute members. On this occasion, I am going to ask the monitoring officer to confirm the outcome of the vote. So please, those in favour, please raise your hands. Maybe carried. Those votes against. Okay, so would the monitoring officer please confirm the outcome of the vote?
So, Mayor, we had one vote against from a constituent council. All of the other constituent councils, including yourself and the deputy mayor, are voting for. That includes the highways authorities, and we have a vote in favour from the business board representative today. So that's carried on basis of that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Nick, could I make a point to follow up on a point that was made by Councillor Bowden, which and Mehmet, which
If
was
you
on
could-
the whether or
okay.
not there will be a third round of LUF funding and what the future of LUF funding is and what the balance is. I think it would be very helpful for this authority and all its constituent members to know what the future of that was, and I wonder whether I could ask you to write to the government to ask them for some more clarity on the future of that fund, please, and maybe not just on the future of that fund, but also how they're likely to be bringing forward future funding, because it's quite difficult. We've sort of seen in the process and the discussion today how difficult it is when they land packets of funding on us at very short notice and we haven't done the preparation work. So if we could make the point that it would be helpful to have some longer term warning about what kinds of funding are going to be available, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
It's a very good point, well made. I will certainly work with Mehmet and the transport team and continue what I would say is an enhanced working relationship with the Department of Transport, trying to sort of clarify that around the LUF funding. So thank you for that. On that note, I will... Oh, well, I'm always delighted to get you to speak, so please.
Now, I just recall earlier you did mention, of course, that cooperative members don't have a vote.
That is correct.
But obviously, as a public meeting, people will be seeing that I'm not voting. But I just want to just say something very briefly on the Peterborough.
Oh.
I am very supportive. I recently went there with our Member of Parliament, spoke with British Transport Police, looking at some of those local issues there. And indeed, after this meeting, I'm going with the council leader to talk about some of the issues of antisocial behaviour in our great city. And I'm a firm believer, and there's evidence to back this up as well, that those sort of improvements that we're looking at making here, it's the broken windows effect. Your walk here this morning was saying, well, that was the bit that wasn't that great. And then we get crime and the fear of crime. So we're talking about environment, we're talking about a public health, and I think this is very much part of that as well. If you look at surveys in Peterborough, crime, the fear of crime will be number one on the list. And I firmly believe that projects like this will help us reduce crime and keep our communities safe. Thank you, Mayor.
The only problem with that is that it should have been in the debate and was a very worthy point. And I only wish that, please don't feel shy. You may not have a vote, but you have a very, and this also goes to Janet at the far end, to a very, very valid reason to speak in our debates. You may not vote, but I would have appreciated that being said earlier rather than later. So
you may have created a monster there, Mayor. So,
Item 2.3 is the March... Does anybody want to take a break at all? Okay, sorry, can we just... We're going to take a break for 3 minutes. 3? Oh, make it... Is that a health problem? Okay, 5 minutes. 5 minutes breaks, please. Are we back on? If we can restart streaming. Let's see, waiting for Lucy actually, yeah. And Wayne. Sorry, my apologies. You're just going to cause trouble. Okay, we're back on streaming and welcome back to the meeting. Thank you for that opportunity for the break. Item 2.3 is the March Future High Streets Funding Bid Scheme. Now, this key decision was added to the forward plan and published on the 11th of August 2021 under General Exception Arrangements. Following publication, a number of the exempt appendices to this report were declassified and then made publicly available on the Combined Authority website on the 20th of August. There are though 7 appendices which remain exempt from publication under Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended, in that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Does any member of the board want to discuss the exempt appendices? Good. In that case, we will move this item to the... sorry, my apologies. In that case, I will now ask John T. Hill, the Director of Business and Skills, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor. This key decision relates to the recommendation to approve the business case received from Fenland District Council to ratify the request for an additional £1.1 million of combined authority funding towards the March Future High Streets Fund scheme. On the 28th of July, the Combined Authority agreed to approve this £1.1 million, subject to a business case being received by the Combined Authority Board to ratify that approval. The request for additional funding is made in addition to £900,000 already approved under the Market Towns programme, making the combined value of the funding ask to £2 million. The Combined Authority has a process set out in the assurance framework for considering new investments. A proportional approach is being applied to projects, and those that fell under the Market Towns programme, which were generally low value projects, were approved via a light touch application form based approach. Given the increase in the overall funding, it is proportionate to apply a higher standard and for the Combined Authority to have sight of a business case to support this decision. By itself, investment would not and has not been forthcoming from the private sector because of viability and other issues. In addition, there is no other public funding mechanism which could realistically drive forward the required public realm investments requested here. Fenland District Council are proposing the delivery of 5 transformational projects which amount to a fundamental redesign of how the town centre functions as a retail, entertainment and residential hub. These include a dramatic intervention to transform Broad Street, opening the riverside areas to improve visibility and access and to connect the town centre to the River Nene, redeveloping the historic marketplace with a new market square, a set of public realm improvements around Acre Road and Backlands, and finally reactivating vacant units of flats and over shops. The business case needs to be read in conjunction with the Project Revisions Report, Appendix 2, and the revised project spending profiles, Appendices 3 and 4. Finally, The benefit-cost ratio for this project is 2.4, which, for comparison, would fall within the very high value for money category if it were a transport project. Hence, the combined authority is recommended to accept the business case for the March Town Regeneration Future High Streets Fund scheme, approve the drawdown of the £1.1 million of subject to approval combined authority funding for the March Future High Street Fund, and authorise the Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer to complete the funding agreement with the grant recipient. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This subject was on the radio this morning. A lot of positivity coming out of Radio Cambridgeshire this morning. Can I go to Councillor Bowden to continue the debate?
Thank you very much, Mayor. And John Hill has very clearly enunciated the advantages which are going to accrue from this series of schemes, which will truly transform. It's once a really good use of that word for once. They'll be absolutely transformative for March Town Centre, which is, to be quite honest, not fit for purpose in its current state, and this is going to make an enormous difference to the lives not merely of people in March, but people who travel through March and those who go to March for work and for shopping. It's also a measure of just how much the local community supports this, that when the March committee for the Growing Fenland project, the £1 million, the Market Towns project, the £1 million per town scheme, when they were considering how to utilise that £1 million, they, rather than looking at a number of other schemes that they could have done, asked to invest £900,000 of that £1 million into this scheme, because the local community absolutely understands the importance of the scheme and how much it will mean to the future of March as an effective local market town, which, as with all our market towns, is growing at a very fast pace indeed. So I very much welcome the comments which have been made. I'm pleased to see the BCR, which is in here, of 2.4, and I'm very happy to commend this. Thank you very much indeed, Mayor.
Councillor Singer. Sorry.
Thank you. I think there is likely to be widespread support for this proposal. I think given the MHCLG funding, for us not to put our bit in would be bonkers. And it is, there are lots of very, very good things about this project. There are lots of things that I think many of us will be supporting. I've got some slight questions about how this Future High Streets Fund generally is being, about the transparency surrounding that fund, but those are not issues for us. And the issue here is that they have offered a substantial amount of money for a very good project in March. So my questions really are about, not relating to the decision that we're making today, because I think that I would be surprised if there isn't support for this scheme here. It's about the next stages in this project, and it's about some of the things that we were talking about earlier, particularly in relation to climate change, in relation to what Anna was just saying about our projects involve lots of building and lots of concrete. I think it is important that we, when we're taking this kind of scheme forward, we look at the materials that we're using and the impact that those are, the environmental impacts of those. And I think it would be interesting for us as an authority to think about how we're going to be reporting on the environmental consequences of the building that we're doing. And this would be an interesting case in point. My other question, that was just a point really. My question is about the parts of this project relating to opening up to the River Nene, which I think is a really, it will be wonderful for March to have that river frontage. But given the challenges of climate change and the risks of flooding, I'm just wondering what elements of that are being taken into account in this scheme, and whether it's going to improve the flood resilience of the town, which I think would be very desirable if it were to be able to do that, and whether that's something that's also being taken into account as the scheme is being taken forward. So one comment and one question, really. I think Chris, looking at the nods, it looks to me as if Chris can answer the question, so that's very helpful.
Yeah, obviously the debate is about should we give the funding, as you say. The wider questions of kind of the credibility and the credentials, environmental credentials, good environmental credentials of the thing. I don't know, John, would you want to come in that, or would possibly Councillor Bowden? Okay, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you. And I thank Councillor Netzinger for her support on this, which is very much appreciated. And yes, there are, as Councillor Netzinger will be very well aware, there are flooding issues within March. There are flooding issues within lots of towns within Cambridgeshire. But as far as the northern part of the county is concerned, March has more than its fair share of issues. But these are not fluvial problems. They're not flooding problems to do with the River Nene. The Nene and its banks are pretty much secure in terms of how high they are, and I don't know if you've actually been there to see just what sort of height of bank we're talking about here, but it is very much above the normal level. The problems we've got in March are more to do with blocked drains and failure to keep drains open and gullies open, and they're not to do with flooding from the river itself. So I can assure you that what's being planned for opening up the river is not going to harm the flooding situation in March one little bit.
Okay, well, he's given his answer. He may have chosen to answer that way. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very supportive of this. As you know, from Huntingdonshire's perspective, we've gone through this round, very difficult round to do. It's very lots of hurdles. It is very transparent, although some people don't always believe it is. I think it really, hopefully, that the vision that you need to bring through deals with a whole host of areas, including climate change as well, and repurposing, reusing, upcycling, and all those wonderful things that can be done with it. And I think as you go through the process, as difficult it is, Huntingshire's always offering their help and assistance where they can from our successful bid. So just like to say, I fully support this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go to Councillor Smith, who is actually also the lead for environment. It's important that environment is discussed at these meetings for all the options, similar to the last item. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Obviously, March will benefit hugely from this, and I think there's no argument that they are an absolute priority area. There's been obviously a considerable lack of investment over the years. So I'm very, very supportive of this. Actually, the plans sound lovely, and I really look forward to going to March and seeing it when all this work is done. But just picking up on my previous theme and on what other colleagues have said today, we've got to get better in our public papers in referencing the environment. So there's nothing in the public paper here that says there will be environmental enhancements, that we'll be planting trees, there'll be increased green space, buildings will be built with low carbon materials, that there will be renewable energy and so on. So we just need to get better about our expectation as a board of the local authorities and the bodies that we are funding. So, they need to be quite clear that we have high expectations, and then we need to get better in communicating it in our public papers so that the public at large can see that this is important to us and we are holding people to account and being ambitious as before. So, I'm sure that will be delivered, but I cannot rely on assumptions. I need it spelled out there so that if things go wrong, I can hold people to account that they haven't actually delivered as well as they should have done. Thank you.
I'm assuming you would want that for all projects, both transport, skills and community, and I'm certainly something as a message to take back to the Chief Executive. I'm glad you said it. You indicated you wanted to speak.
Thanks, Mayor. So obviously the decision on the substantive item is the most important thing here. But I just wanted to draw attention to the papers, the exempt papers. So 17 were exempt. I think 10 are now shown on the website, so you can read 10 of them. And I suppose the question is, going forward, will that policy be applicable to other items in terms of seeing the papers in the public realm so that people can read them? And I think that's important, transparency or lack of secrecy, so that people can read papers that should be available to them because we're spending public funds. And just to pick up on Councillor Smith's point there, it's interesting because those papers that people aren't allowed to read are often to do with something financial, money, counting money. And this is seen as being something that needs to be kept secret, which is, I understand the argument, But we don't count carbon. You can count carbon. There are professors in Bath University that have worked out good ways of counting carbon, and others since then. And we could do that. You know, that could be a way of counting. It doesn't need to be money. So just this focus on money, and you know, that I'm referring to there, is not the only thing in the world to count. Thanks, Mary.
On the point you made about how this issue was brought to the paper, I'd like to bring in the monitoring officer, because I think it's a fair point and absolutely want to push transparency.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, very important point, and this not happy that we needed to take the challenge, but happy that we did on this, and that we subsequently disclosed more documentation than initially. It is clearly important to be as transparent as possible. We know the legislation does have a number of exemptions, but that they are subject to a public interest test. I think this is a timely reminder to myself and the team that we need to test fully. We're mindful that we try to do that, and I think this is just making it very clear to us that we'll always look to do that. So we need to be testing all and challenging colleagues where there is a start point of wanting to exempt documents that we will always look to challenge and fully justify. That had been the way that I thought we were working, but of course under challenge sometimes we find that there's room to change. But as I say, we take the point, and yeah, we're absolutely committed to being as transparent as possible. So.
Thank you. I think most people have spoken, but I just want to make it clear that the co-opted members, if you want to come in on this debate, is anything particularly you want to add? As I said, you're always welcome to speak. On that note, I am... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I should have...
Councillor Fitzgerald.
I'll just be very brief. I'm again, I talked about supporting projects, you know, where it needs the support, and I agree with what's been said. You know, certainly this project is one of those that, you know, fits the remit of the combined authority, and I would wholly support Councillor Bowden and colleagues in progressing this, because if there is investment needed in Fenland, that's where it certainly is needed in that area, and I just want to put on record my support. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy. I'm moving the recommendation from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowden. Councillor Bowden. So this, I'll confirm the seconder. Yes. Yes, Councillor. So there seems to be a general flavour in of the recommendation. So I propose to take it as approved unanimously, unless anyone objects now. No. No objections. Okay. So, thank you all. We're now going to move on to item 2.4, is IMET Opportunity and Combined Authority Accommodation Needs. Now, this key decision was added to the forward plan and published on the 16th of August 2021 under General Exception Arrangements. We have several questions from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in relation to this report. Councillor Lorna Dupre, the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, joins us to share these. Councillor Dupre, would you like to come forward and ask your questions, please? We will take these one at a time.
Thank you, Mayor. Do you wish me to read these one at a time then?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. First question, does the combined authority have an accommodation strategy? If not, why not? And what plans are there to develop one? If it does have an accommodation strategy, how does the suggestion of purchasing a freehold for a premises at Auckland align with this strategy?
Okay. As I say, we'll take them one at a time. The response is, with the impact of COVID, the strategy to leave Alconbury to review future office requirements at an appropriate point has saved the combined authority from having to continue to pay for an expensive office that it would not have been able to use. With the prospect of organisations returning to offices with appropriate COVID mitigations, I am very keen to see the combined authority identify and secure its future office space. Hence, the option of looking now at IMET in case the board considers this appropriate, or starting a search exercise to see what options are available more widely in the market.
Thank you, Mayor. The question was whether the combined authority has an accommodation strategy. Does it have a strategy?
Yeah, to find a new property.
I would say that we have a number of principles that are emerging, Councillor Dupre, following the COVID crisis, and I'll look for a new accommodation. And these relate to the fact that we want to support flexible working for staff. We want to therefore be somewhere centrally based for allowing easy access for members, and we also want to support potentially where we can premises that are zero carbon or as carbon neutral as they can be. We haven't captured those principles yet into a strategy, a formally written strategy, but clearly I think your question today is really prompting us to do so, and if Scrutiny would like to be involved in that, I'm happy to take discussion of that into the Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should I move on to my second question then, Mayor? The second question is, the Combined Authority surrendered the lease on the previous accommodation at Auckland due to public transport access. Therefore, what has happened in the interim to change that view?
The decision to leave Alconbury previously was based on a variety of factors, including the previous mayor's preference for a location and an opportunity to get out of a lease that seemed expensive in terms of rental outgoings. With the occupation by Cambridgeshire County Council, public transport access to the site is expected to improve.
Thank you. Question 3. What analysis has been done to suggest Auckland is a suitable venue for the Combined Authority?
Alconbury, a place I know well, but is an established office location, and if either the IMET or other premises were considered at Alconbury for the Combined Authority's future office needs, the proximity to the new County Council offices at Alconbury would also offer benefits for more collaborative working.
Thank you very much. Question 4. What are the overall costs for surrendering the lease of the previous premises in Auckland?
The net financial impact of vacating the Incubator 2 building as of August 2021, including the costs incurred by the Combined Authority directly due to not having a large office space, is a saving of £65,000. I'm happy for the officers to share a breakdown of this figure with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee outside of this meeting. As the monthly costs incurred in the absence of an office are substantially less than the monthly costs avoided, this saving will increase each month the Combined Authority continues to work remotely and to use my office in Ely as an operational hub. The cost of acquiring and fitting out new premises will not be known until the purchase or the lease of a new office proceeds. The report before the board recommends that an offer of £3.15 million for the IMET should be considered. If the board decides not to make an offer on the IMET, then officers have requested an indicative budget of £20,000 in order to undertake a market search and associated works. The cost of an acquisition beyond this is unknown, as it will depend on the properties available on the market.
Thank you very much. And the final question is a general one. The committee is concerned that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is concerned that 3 of the 4 substantive items on the agenda for the board have been placed on the agenda by way of general exception notice. What plans does the Combined Authority have to ensure that adequate notice is given for significant decisions in future?
Councillor Dupre, I share your concerns, but I have some good news. As part of a governance review, the Combined Authority will be examining the process of report preparation, stakeholder engagement and consultation. Among the expected outcomes, this will deliver better horizon scanning and timely entry onto the forward plan. Thank you, Councillor Dupre. That concludes the questions from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and my thanks to the committee for their questions, and particularly to Councillor Dupre for joining us today to share them with the board. This report will now be introduced by Roger Thompson, the Director of Housing and Development. Roger.
Roger, yeah, we want to hear your dulcet tones. Can you put your microphone on?
Middle button. Middle button.
Okay, there we go. Apologies. Thank you. So with the prospect of organisations starting to return to their office environments, alongside the successful national COVID vaccination rollout, the combined authority are keen to start to identify and secure its future office requirement. This has coincided with a local business making an offer to acquire the freehold interest in the IMET Centre at Alconbury Weald, upon which the CPCA has an interest. The IMET Centre has the potential to act as a future office space for the CPCA, although it is not a bespoke office building, and as you can see from the plans in the report in Appendix 3. Before proceeding with a transaction to sell the property to a local business, it makes sense for the board to be aware of the possibility of utilising the IMET Centre for the CPCA's own occupation and use, in case the board is attracted by that possibility. If not, the board is recommended to instruct officers to undertake a market search for other potential office opportunities, to include potential space in buildings owned by the CPCA constituent councils and other public sector bodies and agencies in our area. The main advantages and disadvantages of the two options for the future of the IMET are identified in the report, and on that note I hand back to the board to consider the paper.
Thank you. I'm going to open the debate. Councillor Bowden.
May I just ask as a point of order, please? The paper says for voting arrangements that a simple majority of all members present and voting is required. My apologies if I've got this wrong, or that I'm not certain about the process, but would I be correct in saying that for a vote to be successful, it also has to have the vote of the mayor?
Yeah. Do you want to go on?
Absolutely, Councillor Bowden's correct, and that stands actually, of course, for all business of the combined authority. We should amplify that in documents, but yes, any vote for an item must include the vote of the mayor or the statutory deputy in the absence of the mayor.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I was hoping my memory hadn't failed me, but since it didn't state that, I thought I'd better get that clear. Given that we're talking about something which is institutional for this institution, and the mayor has effectively a veto on a decision, may I suggest, Mayor, to save us going around the houses and possibly talking about things which aren't relevant, maybe you could give us a lead on this first, so we can then talk to your lead.
I'm recommended to adopt B. Does that help? Yeah.
Well, thank you. I would be happy to speak then, finally.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with you that B is the correct one to approach in this particular case. I was a little bit surprised that this is even being suggested that we should occupy a centre which is not really suitable for us, which will take a lot of money to, we don't know how much, to get into a suitable state for us, which depends upon us getting a tenant, and which, and this is the crucial point for me, potentially, and we can only go on what's in the papers in front of us, but potentially would deprive a business of a location which it clearly wants, and without which we may lose that business entirely from the whole combined authority area. So, and that final one is the crucial one for me, because the combined authority is meant to be promoting business. It's meant to be, its fundamental purpose is to increase GVA. So I would like to suggest, well, maybe to support what you're saying about B. But in terms of B, I'm a bit concerned about the conducting a market search, potentially incurring fees in doing so, which I think is maybe not a necessary way of going about this, considering that I know that offers have already been made from other authorities, constituent authorities, to be able to provide accommodation. And we don't necessarily have to be all on one site. Not necessarily, and certainly from Fenland's point of view, speaking to our Chief Executive only this morning, we have not really heard back from the Combined Authority about the offers that we have made. I don't know if other authorities have heard back, but we have opportunities of premises with easy, free parking, both on-street and off-street in Fenland, and we'd be more than delighted to make accommodation available, potentially even for the full size that you're talking about. Does it not make sense to have a proper consultation with our individual authorities first to see what we ourselves can manage to provide? And I include within that Cambridgeshire County Council, because I'm well aware that the new Shire Hall, which has now risen from the ground at Alconbury, that was conceived at a very different time. It was conceived totally pre-COVID, and I dare say that now some different considerations are in the minds of the leadership of the authority compared with the considerations which were in the mind of the leadership of the authority just 2 years ago. I wouldn't be surprised, and Lucy can speak for herself, of course, but I wouldn't be surprised if there wouldn't be opportunities even to make use of accommodation within the new Shire Hall, which would make a great deal of sense for at least some of the accommodation needs. My apologies for speaking for you on that, Lucy, but it just seemed to me to be common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. I just wonder, Roger, do you want to come in terms of any of the comments made there by Councillor Bowden about the discussions that we've had as a combined authority in engaging, with our constituent members about looking for new accommodation? Do you want to give an update on that from your point of view?
Yes, of course, Mayor. You're right, there were some discussions, I think they were 12 months or so ago, about other options. I think we said quite clearly that there's obviously going to be a priority to see if there is potential space in other constituent council offices or other public sector bodies' offices. That obviously may well be a preference in a search, in that it means that finance, if you like, is kept within the public sector. If you haven't had responses, I can only apologise for that. We will make sure you do get responses, and obviously we'll look to update the opportunities that you have for us in your respective council areas.
In light of that, may I suggest a market search isn't the appropriate thing for us to be asking for here. It is for further consultation with the constituent authorities in order to see if there is a public sector-based solution first before we go out for a market search, and I hope we wouldn't need to.
Are you proposing that we should insert that, what you've just described, as well as the market search before waiting for another board meeting, because the desire to sort of move on? I think it's an option that should be explored. Are you not reassured by Director that it will happen?
Well, we are passing a resolution saying we're instructing for a market search exercise to take place. I would suggest we should have a public sector search take place first before any market search, if it turns out to be necessary. So we can make that amendment. Is that okay?
I'll adjust that perhaps once the debate continues.
Yeah, so we continue with the debate. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally support everything Councillor Bowden has just said. We haven't at the moment got any sort of information or analysis on the actual number of desk spaces that's needed. It's a bit vague, between 26 and 60. It's quite... until we understand what desk space we need, it's quite hard to carry out a search, I think. 3.15 million or more, we're told. It might take more to actually acquire the building. For 25 to 60 desk spaces is 52k to 112k per desk space. I don't believe for one single second we need to spend that on a building that's admittedly in the paper itself too big for our needs anyway. So it's an inappropriate building. There's no information on the conversion costs because it's a building that was not built for the purpose which we're looking to use it for, and there's no information on ongoing revenue costs either. I don't think there was any information in there about whether it's carbon neutral or not, so I don't even know if it's satisfying. Somebody said somewhere, and I think it was Kim, an ambition to be in a carbon neutral building. But the most important thing, as Councillor Bowden has said, is that a local company is wanting it, and I'm sure that Huntingdonshire District Council is quite keen to see that local company retained in its district. They've put an offer on the table, and I think that needs looking at very seriously. So I support as well Councillor Bowden's idea that we do not need to be spending £20,000 conducting with consultants conducting market research to find 26 to 60 desk spaces and a meeting room. It's not a highly technical exercise. I really don't think it is. We need some desks and a meeting room. So I totally support the idea of going around the constituent authorities first, although again I'm not sure that's going to necessarily reach the carbon neutral ambition. But I think that's not the most important thing necessarily. To my mind, we need a full options appraisal, including looking at constituent local authorities' estates, and especially, as Councillor Bowden said, the County Council new premises. That seems just an obvious discussion to be had immediately. So I say let the local company move in and get on with the options appraisal and put 2.4 million back in to the Combined Authority Board and the Business Board for local use to support what we're here to do. And just on a final note, I'm disappointed to see that we've spent money with Savills checking planning permission for IMET to see whether it complies with CPCA use ambition. And I wonder how much we've had to spend with Savills to check something that was probably never ever going anywhere. I just think we seem to be throwing the money around like there's no tomorrow. I mean, I can't believe that it was less than £4,000 or something to check with Savills. And I would like to know how much it was, because I think it was not a good spend. Thanks. So I support, I don't support either A or B in their current form, but I would support carrying out discussions with constituent authorities.
We're working on the amendment for B. Roger, do you know any questions?
I'll give a reply for the meeting to the Savills cost. I want to make sure I'll get that accurate for you.
Okay. Jan, did you want to come in as sort of...
Yeah, so not familiar with all the detail that everybody else is, obviously, and sitting in the world of health, but in the CCG, we, over the last 12 months, have saved a significant amount of public money by moving people to home-based contracts, using a hub-based approach, using much more meeting space, and ironically we found that quite difficult to get space somewhere where we wanted to get shared space with other people, because actually it became more cost prohibitive trying to do that. So we've ended up in effectively a privately owned under a privately owned lease. So I think there's a question for all of us, I think, in this, which is how are we really going to work together in that public estate, and are we all moving in the same direction to say, are people home working, are we doing this, are we still using the technology? Because that's really what drives that agenda of the environment, people's health and well-being, is knowing that we can create some flexibility in the workplace. So my question was, I think A doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I don't understand why anyone would do that. But I do think there is a question of, are we all really moving to a new, different way of working in our offices? If so, what's the mood music on that, and how does the Combined Authority match and accelerate that and set the example for everybody in doing that? Because I would be very willing to have those debates about how we get better use of public estates and quite frankly stop the cross-charging or whatever it is that's just meaning money's moving around the system when it could be on services. How are we going to solve that problem would be my reflection on this. Because we've all got space. Everyone's got space now.
Well, I don't think
Anna, you're very welcome to come and join
I don't
us.
think the Combined Authority wants to be put under the stairs, but I think we do need to explore these options, and it's already been. We will bring that amendment. But can I just bring in Kim, please, as CEO, please?
I would just like to say, Jan, that I take the challenge. I think it's a very good one. I've already said that Councillor Dupere has already charged us with putting into words our accommodation strategy, and in that I mentioned that flexible working is something that very much from our staffing survey is coming forward as something they'd like to look at going forward. So yes, let's meet and let's discuss how we can bring something back here which establishes all those principles for this board to agree.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm glad that we're discounting one, because it just seemed like madness, quite honestly, particularly in light of us having no strategy. We've never agreed as a board to become a landlord, which suddenly we were about to do. And actually, I don't think we should be making decisions like this prior to the arrival of the new chief executive, quite honestly, who will, have very firm views of her own about how, as an organisation, we're going to work. So I agree with everything Councillor Bowden said, but actually I think Jan has said the most interesting thing, that actually we all of us need to be getting together to, discuss all our public assets as a whole. So the NHS already sit on the top floor of South Cambridgeshire Hall, very happily. So the South Cambridgeshire District Council, we are doing a massive refurbishment of our building with greening South Cambridgeshire Hall to turn it into a zero carbon building. That will be up and running by the end of this year. We will happily accommodate some of the combined authority in the new zero carbon South Cambridgeshire Hall. We can't do it while all the works are going on, but we're doing things like installing 20 EV charging points and so on. So we're doing everything we can, and you are welcome there. And but talk to us. And again, we've made offers, but we haven't had response to them. And this hub model works really well. We're a big district, and to have a hub approach plays well to our staff and plays well to our residents as well. Absolutely support us starting off talking to all of us, but actually also talking to other public sector organisations before spending vast amounts of money with more consultants to do, create more bits of paper which are just going to sit on shelves gathering dust. This is probably not the time, but I would like us to be discussing the whole issue of IMET and the fact that the original grant terms didn't include formal clawback provisions, and actually we seem to have no way of receiving the grant back that would under normal circumstances be owed to us. So I would like a conversation at some point about what assurances we can have as a board that that is never ever going to happen again, quite honestly, because I think it's deeply concerning. Thank you.
Well, obviously the IMET scenario and what I've found out since I've come into this role was one that was raised my eyebrows. Just for the record, the reason that the discussion was and even came about considering the idea of taking on the IMET was almost from myself as a public servant finding it hard to believe at how much money had been lost in the process, and almost a feeling of, God, let's hold on to something, and in the long term maybe it would come into something. Now, I appreciate that might be my naivety on that one, and it's been interesting by having those discussions. It may indeed have helped in terms of moving forward, working with any potential new person to come into the IMET building, but also in some of the discussions that we've had with the potential new landlords on the Auckland site. But I take on board everything that everybody said, particularly Jan's comment as well about linking in with all the different constituent board members. Obviously, there's a potential danger that you could be too disparate, and I am quite keen to have a combined authority that has an identity, and it's not just an identity around the mayor. I'm very proud of my organisation, and I want my organisation to feel it has a home rather than a wandering presence around Greater Cambridgeshire and Peterborough or whatever. Sorry, I didn't mean to say Greater Cambridgeshire. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So I hope that fully that's sort of explained a few things from my point of view. Sorry, Professor, do you want to come in again? Sorry, apologies. So
I absolutely agree with the sort of direction of travel of the conversation, and I think the first option it's worth thinking about. But actually, when you start to explore in more detail, the option of the business moving in there makes more sense. And clearly, that discussion's got to continue, and contracts have to be sorted out. The point I was going to make comes back to an extent to something that Councillor Smith said earlier, and picks up on Jan's comment. And certainly, when we've been thinking in the university about our space and utilisation of space, we've taken a view which says that over the next 6 months or so, actually people's work patterns are really not going to settle down. And so it's worth taking a bit of time to think through what the work patterns will look like. Because you can imagine, I know from my perspective, an in-person meeting at the moment is a great treat. And for the next few months, I'll be really keen on doing in-person meetings and getting away from Teams and Zoom. In 6 months' time, I'll settle down again, and I'll go, actually, Teams and Zoom was quite convenient, and I'll do some things online and some things in person. And I think our work patterns are really, all of us are going to change over the next 6 months. It's a bit like a pendulum. We won't settle down for a while, so I wouldn't get locked into something too quickly.
Thank you. Representative of the County Council.
Thank you. So actually what I was going to say follows on very well from what Andy's just said, in that I think it's quite, the County Council hasn't even started occupying its new building yet. It's very unclear how much space there's going to be available there. I think it's probably quite unclear in some of the districts as well how much space. I mean, some of them may know they've got bags of space. Others, as you were saying, the new work patterns are, I'm sure some new work patterns will continue, as we were discussing earlier about travel into London. I'm sure there will be some change in the way that people work, but it's very difficult to know at this stage exactly what that's going to look like. So I think those conversations are important, but I would absolutely agree with Andy that we need to be thinking flexibly about what future accommodation for the combined authority looks like, and having conversations with partners very seriously, but also with others about what accommodation might be available and for how long, and what those needs might be, because I think that particularly at Alconbury, I think as the County Council settles into that new building, we will also begin to understand how much space is available there, what we're lacking, because I think there are some things that it's already potentially becoming clear. We don't necessarily have exactly what we need there. So I think the conversation is what's really important here, and making sure that we're talking to a wide range of people and thinking about flexible use in the future about all of our public assets. I had one more point I wanted to make with Nick, which follows on from the point that Bridget was making about the IMET scheme generally, which I think has been pretty shocking. As somebody who is relatively new on the board, I don't quite understand how the board got to this position. I think it would perhaps be useful for there to be a review of that, and I don't know whether that's been done. I don't know what the terms are about us referring things to overview or audit or governance, but I think a review of that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, it is a long history, which before the business board had involvement of the LEP. Can I just bring in CEO Kim to give a response to your request, and then Councillor Niche.
I think Councillor Nethsing, I think the best way to look at this is probably to ask the officers to circulate a briefing paper to all members of this board outlining the history of the IMET building. It was pre the combined authority and pre the current business board, so there is quite a long history to how we arrived at the position we did. And then once we've circulated that briefing, it should contain a number of options about how you might want to look forward, one of which may be to refer to the Audit and Governance Committee. So can I suggest we do that, and we can perhaps pick up at a leader strategy meeting how you might like to take it forward.
Councillor Niche, my apologies for not coming to you sooner.
That's quite all right. It was quite interesting to listen to everybody else. Fortunately, I haven't got a great deal to say at the moment now, because actually most of it's already been said, which is great. I mean, I am fully aware of the local company, which is probably why this has come to fruition so quickly, because they're literally about, fingers crossed, hopefully it hasn't delayed it, about to sign on the dotted line. And, you know, we've been trying to welcome and bring in this company, and it would have been devastating, I think, from a locality perspective, if this company wasn't able to expand and utilise this one. And also, I mean, we talked about the money spent on looking at purposing. I would actually suggest in the collaboration that we've all been talking about of looking at things, is that maybe a quick phone call to a local planning authority might have been able to give a quick answer as to what that purpose of the property can or can't be used for, because we do have quite a lot of knowledge on that one. So again, and looking at the £20,000 suggestion of that, I actually think we've almost like worn that one through now. It probably isn't necessary yet. It's probably too early, because you don't really understand, from what I can see, of what your purposing is, of how much space you want. I think that stuff needs to come first. And in the light of what also has been said, as we all know, is that things are chopping and changing of how people do work and want to work. And it's too early. And as we've all said, I think we've all offered up in the past, locations, and I fully understand that you have to decide what is best for the combined authority, and the board is the one that makes that supports me with that decision. Hopefully, when it gets to it. So I think, I can understand the reason for it coming so quickly, but I think it's almost like let's take a bit of a step back and chill for a while.
There is a chief monitoring officer will raise has made an amendment to B, if I could come to that, and then maybe to...
I'll be brief, Nick. So,
oh, right, sorry, can you go to Councillor Alexander?
I won't take up much time, because I echo what everybody says, and notwithstanding the amendment to B, but I'll finish where Chris started. I am giving guided tours of this facility after the meeting, with 22,000 square feet available in our brilliantly purposed, recycled, fantastic development here. So happy to further those conversations as well. So I'm sure we've all got our own flags to fly, and I shall be flying ours about 12:30 when the tour begins.
So I believe I'm watching the free market in action here. You're all bidding against each other. You're looking for competitive prices. Oh, Darryl. Sorry, Martin came in and then Darryl. Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple of points to add to the debate. So Councillor Bailey talked about not being keen on consulting or getting expert advice. So I'm a fan of getting advice, especially when it's paid for, because then there's some sort of comeback, isn't there? So I think in terms of speaking for the combined authority, which I'm doing here today, I'd be in favour of getting advice, because unless an officer can give that advice, but I'm not quite sure if that would be appropriate. And in terms of what Councillor Bowden said about space at Fenland, well, I think the thing, the word market in B, I presume means the market economy, paying for things. I don't know if Councillor Bowden is offering space free in his authority. I mean, I presume not. So we're all offering whatever we've got at a cost, because we've got to pay, pay our costs. So somebody's got to pay for it in the end. And that then comes back to the whole point about a market search by an estate agents, who would, I presume, include the authorities that are offering space in that search. And why wouldn't that be the case? And that comes back to the thing about those papers that weren't in online available, because this is about transparency. So taxpayers need to know who's offering what and at what cost. So that's a point, I think. On a couple more points, Mayor, if I may. So home working, this is an issue for people. I mean, if 1 or 2 or 3 or more people in a household are all working from home, including students, children, the house becomes a place of stress. And of course, it saves businesses and this organisation potentially money to do that, because accommodation is one of the most, aside from labour charges, is a big cost. And if that's saved, then that's great for the organisation. But it can be bad for society, bad for people, bad for mental health, in terms of trying to all, co-live, co-work in one place. And to cut to the chase, a young person may be employed by the local, by this authority, might be working in their bedroom and living in their bedroom and sleeping in their bedroom. And that's not a good place for a young person to exist, I believe. So I think that needs to be taken on board. I understand that, in terms of numbers, the 24 to 60 or something desks, well, I think the sort of industry standard has been 0.7 of the number is what's required, but of course that might change post-COVID, but we don't know yet. And in terms of the building itself, it's not just about the number of desks, it's where it needs to be, the best location, what sort of building, the access to the building, all of that, of course, is going to be important. So I think we can search, we can start to search anyway, that's my opinion. It's going to be difficult, obviously, to find the right building, I guess, and we need to bottom out those parameters, but I'd be in favour of a market search myself that includes looking at local authority offers as well.
Thank you, Mayor. On the first point, I'm interested in what Councillor Bowden suggested there, because I don't think it's about just consultancy. I think it's about what time we would go down that road. So it seems sensible to me to save the public purse at this time. The point I really want to make, and it follows on from Jan's really interesting and useful comments, because obviously I have a large estate as well. And we struggle there. By the way, I could do a tour as well. So we can have that discussion. But I think there is something what Jan's saying there as well, because I feel that sometimes maybe with my estates people, they'll be looking at other blue light services. They'll be looking at commercial or new builds. And I think sometimes we might be missing a trick, because when we look at my area, crime and fear of crime and community safety, it's always going to be a partnership approach. So another benefit there is potentially sort of co-location of officers with police officers, you know, when they're actually in that same business area. So that's just an added bolt-on, but strategically there is something for me here about our public sector estates and how we can make best use of them. Thank you.
Thank you. He's coming back. You didn't speak before, but now you get your second bite of the cherry.
Just another dig in. I think that be mindful of when we're talking about the search out for estates is I'm not aware. Cambridge might have it, but we haven't got signs out saying "Come here, we've got free space." Which is why I think the benefit is to ask around first before you go outside. Ask your partners first.
Partnership. Okay, thank you. I was sort of minded. We've got a proposal which Robert will, having listened to you and your feedback, just a slight amendment to the start of the point B, and then maybe take that to the vote. Robert?
Yeah, so Mayor, hopefully this captures what's been agreed generally. Obviously we've had the debate without seeing the proposed amendment. The amendment's removing words, adding some, it's not negating the principle of the recommendation. I'll take you through it slowly. Apologies we haven't got it on the screen, it hasn't been circulated. But we're removing the parts, the words consider through to exercise. I'll read it out in full in a moment. And then we're also removing the parts including to bodies, and I'll read it out completely. So the amended recommendation is to this. It's to carry out a search exercise within the estate of the constituent councils and other public sector bodies in the area of the combined authority for other potential opportunities to secure office space to meet CPCA's future office needs, and then the output to be reported back to the board with options for consideration. So it is removing the market search exercise, and it's envisaged that may be triggered following a report back rather than be part of this recommendation. Nah.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate that's come to it's come at the end of the debate, but I think it reflects a lot of nods of assent there. So. If you were willing, I'd like to move to the vote on what's just been read out by Robert Parkin. So, votes in favour, please raise your hand.
I need a seconder.
Oh, sorry, I need a seconder.
Yeah,
you've done everyone, Councillor Bowden. Councillor Bailey, seconder. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I've got a seconder. Votes in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you. Carried unanimously by a majority. Thank you again for the input, and sort of, well, obviously, Combined Authority's got a few bits of work to do there. That concludes our business for today. Thank you to those members of the press and public who've joined us today, either in person or by watching the live stream. The board is next planned to meet on Wednesday, the 29th of September, Councillor Bowden, at Fenland Hall in March. I declare this meeting closed. And just to say, there is a sandwich lunch available for board members once the meeting room has been cleared of press and public. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your summer holiday.